In the spring of 1945, German mothers watched in disbelief as American soldiers did something they never expected. They fed their starving children. These women had been told for years that the Americans were barbaric monsters who would destroy everything they loved. Yet here they were, handing out chocolate bars and hot meals while their own Nazi leaders had left them to die. What made these enemy soldiers show more compassion to German children than their own government ever did? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. In the spring of 1945, Germany was dying. The Third Reich that Adolf Hitler promised would last 1,000 years was crumbling after only 12. Cities that once stood proud now lay in ruins. Berlin, Hamburg, Dresden, and Cologne were mountains of broken concrete and twisted metal. Allied bombs had fallen like rain for months, turning neighborhoods into graveyards. The smell of smoke and death hung in the air everywhere you went. The German people were starving. Food rations had been cut again and again. By April, most civilians received only 1,000 calories per day. That is less than half of what a person needs to survive. Children stopped growing. Old people simply lay down and did not get up again. Mothers watched their babies cry from hunger and had nothing to give them. The bread was made from sawdust mixed with a little flour. Soup was just hot water with a few potato peels floating in it. People boiled grass and tree bark to fill their stomachs with something, anything. There was no running water in most places. Bombs had destroyed the pipes underground. Women carried buckets to wells or rivers, walking miles each day just to get water for drinking and cooking. Electricity came and went like a ghost. Some days the lights worked for an hour. Other days there was nothing but darkness. The trains barely ran anymore. Trucks sat empty because there was no gasoline. The whole country had stopped moving. Families were torn apart. Millions of men were dead on battlefields across Europe and Russia. Millions more were missing, and their wives did not know if they would ever come home. Children wandered the streets alone, their parents killed in bombing raids or lost in the chaos. Women became the heads of households by default. They had no choice. Their husbands were gone, and someone had to keep the children alive. For years, Nazi propaganda had filled German minds with hatred and fear. The radio, the newspapers, the posters on every wall told the same lies over and over. The Americans were coming to destroy Germany completely. They would burn every house. They would kill every man. They would do terrible things to women and children. The Americans were barbarians, the propaganda said. They were monsters in human skin. German mothers believed these lies because they heard them every single day for 12 years. In a small town in the Rhineland, the war arrived with the sound of tank engines. The town had perhaps 5,000 people before the war. Now there were half that many, and most of them were women, children, and old men. The buildings on the main street had been hit by bombs. Walls stood with no roofs above them. Windows gaped like empty eye sockets. Rubble filled the streets so thick that people had to climb over piles of bricks to get anywhere. Frau Hoffmann lived in half of a house. The other half had been blown away in a raid 6 months earlier. She was 32 years old but looked 50. Her face was thin and gray. Her hands shook all the time now. She had 3 children. The oldest was Greta, who was 8. Then came Klaus, who was 5, and baby Elsa, who was almost 2. Frau Hoffmann's husband had died on the Eastern Front in 1943. She had received one letter telling her he was dead. That was all. No body to bury, no grave to visit. Just gone. Every morning, Frau Hoffmann woke up with one thought: keep the children alive one more day. She searched through garbage for anything to eat. She traded her wedding ring for half a loaf of bread. She made soup from nettles and dandelions. Greta's legs were thin as sticks. Her eyes seemed too big for her face. Klaus had sores on his skin that would not heal because his body had no strength left to fix itself. Baby Elsa cried weakly, too tired even to cry loud. Next door lived Frau Weber, an old woman who had been a schoolteacher before the war. She was maybe 70 years old. Her back was bent and her hair was white as snow. But she still believed in the Führer. Even now, with everything falling apart, she spoke about how Germany would rise again. She told Frau Hoffmann that the Americans were coming to punish them all. "They will take everything," she said. "They will hurt our children. This is what enemies do." On a gray morning in April, the sound changed. Instead of distant artillery, there were engines very close. Loud engines, many of them. Frau Hoffmann grabbed her children and pulled them inside. She held them close and told them to be quiet. Through the broken window, she could see American tanks rolling down the street. Soldiers walked beside the tanks with rifles in their hands. They wore uniforms that looked clean and new. Their faces were not gray and starving like German faces. They looked healthy. They looked fed. Frau Hoffmann's heart pounded. This was the moment the propaganda had warned about for years. The monsters had arrived. She held Greta's hand so tight it hurt. She waited for the shouting, the shooting, the violence. But it did not come. The tanks stopped. The soldiers spread out through the town, checking buildings. They were not burning anything. They were not shooting civilians. Some of them were even smiling and waving at the children who peeked out from doorways. Then one soldier saw Greta standing in the ruined doorway. He was young, maybe 20 years old. He walked over slowly. Frau Hoffmann pulled Greta back, afraid. But the soldier knelt down. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a brown bar wrapped in paper. He held it out to Greta. He said something in English that Frau Hoffmann could not understand. But his face was kind. He was offering the child something. Greta looked up at her mother. Frau Hoffmann did not know what to do. This was the enemy, but he was giving her daughter food. Greta took the brown bar from the soldier's hand. She unwrapped the paper slowly, her fingers trembling. Inside was something dark brown that smelled sweet. It was chocolate, real chocolate. Greta had not seen chocolate in 2 years. She broke off a small piece and put it in her mouth. The sweetness exploded on her tongue. Her eyes filled with tears. She had forgotten that food could taste like this. She had forgotten that anything in the world could be this good. Frau Hoffmann watched her daughter cry while eating chocolate given by an American soldier. Everything she had been told was wrong. This man was supposed to be a monster. Instead, he was feeding her starving child. The soldier smiled at Greta, then walked away to join his unit. Frau Hoffmann's hands were shaking. Her mind could not make sense of what had just happened. Within hours, more Americans arrived. They set up what they called a field kitchen in the town square. It was like nothing the German women had ever seen. Huge metal pots sat on portable stoves. Soldiers in white aprons stirred food that actually steamed with heat. The smell of cooking meat drifted through the air. Real meat. Not rat meat or horse meat scraped from dead animals in the street. Actual beef. Women and children gathered around, drawn by the smell. They were afraid, but also desperately hungry. An American officer stood on a box and spoke in broken German. He said they were going to feed everyone. Free food, no cost. Just come and eat. The women looked at each other in disbelief. Was this a trick? Would they be arrested if they took the food? But the children were already moving forward. Hunger won over fear. The soldiers handed out metal trays and began filling them with food. White bread. Real white bread made from wheat flour, not sawdust. Mashed potatoes with butter melting on top. Grain beans. And meat. Actual chunks of beef in thick brown gravy. Each person got a full tray. More food than most German families had seen in a month. Frau Hoffmann took a tray for herself and her children. They sat on a pile of rubble and ate. Greta cried again. Klaus ate so fast he choked and had to stop. Baby Elsa grabbed potatoes with her tiny hands and shoved them in her mouth. Frau Hoffmann ate slowly, trying to make it last. The food was warm. It was real. It was more than she had dared to dream of for years. She looked around at the American soldiers. They were eating too, sitting on their trucks and talking. She watched one soldier take 3 bites of his sandwich and then throw the rest away. He threw it away. Half a sandwich with real meat and bread, just tossed in the garbage. Frau Hoffmann stared. That half sandwich was more than her family would have eaten in 2 days, and he threw it away like it was nothing. The next day, more supplies arrived. The Americans brought trucks full of food and supplies. One truck had a red label on the side that said Coca-Cola. The soldiers unloaded wooden crates filled with glass bottles. The bottles had dark liquid inside and metal caps on top. The Americans opened the bottles and drank from them, then offered them to the German children. Greta tried one. It was sweet and fizzy and cold. She had never tasted anything like it. The bubbles tickled her nose. She giggled for the first time in months. More things came. Warm wool blankets in green and brown. Bars of white soap that actually made bubbles. Cans of milk. Boxes of crackers. The Americans seemed to have endless supplies. They handed things out like it meant nothing to them, like they had so much they could not possibly use it all. A black American soldier noticed that Klaus had a cut on his arm. The cut was infected. Red lines spread from it up toward his shoulder. The soldier called Klaus over and sat him down. He opened a medical kit that had more supplies than the town doctor had seen in a year. Bandages, medicine, clean cotton, tape, everything organized in neat rows. The soldier cleaned the wound with water from a canteen. He put white cream on it that stung but felt cool. He wrapped it in a clean white bandage and taped it carefully. Frau Hoffmann watched this black soldier treating her son with such gentle care. The Nazi propaganda had told her that black people were not even human. They were animals, the posters had said, dangerous beasts. But this man was being kinder to Klaus than any German doctor had been in years. He smiled at Klaus and gave him a piece of candy when he was done. Klaus smiled back. That night, Frau Hoffmann couldn't sleep. She lay in her ruined house with her children beside her, their bellies full for the first time in so long. She thought about everything she had seen. The chocolate, the hot food in massive quantities, the waste, the kindness, the medical care, the endless supplies. She thought about the last 4 years under Nazi rule. The rations getting smaller and smaller. The leaders telling them to sacrifice everything for victory. The propaganda saying Germany was strong and the enemies were weak. But the enemies were not weak. The Americans had so much food they threw half of it away. They had medicine and trucks and fuel and everything. Germany had nothing. The Nazi leaders had lied about that too. Frau Hoffmann came by the next morning. The old teacher looked angry. She said the Americans were trying to trick them. She said the food was probably poisoned. She said it was a plan to make Germans weak and grateful so they would accept occupation. Frau Hoffmann said nothing. She just looked at Greta, who was playing with an empty Coca-Cola bottle like it was a treasure. Her daughter had color in her cheeks again. Just 2 days of real food, and she looked alive. Easter Sunday came 2 weeks after the Americans arrived. The town square had been partly cleared of rubble. Someone had swept the broken glass away. The Americans put up long wooden tables in rows. They covered the tables with white cloths that looked clean and bright against all the gray destruction around them. Frau Hoffmann had not seen a white tablecloth in years. She had forgotten that such things existed. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The American chaplain stood in the square and spoke in German. His accent was heavy, but the words were clear. He said they wanted to celebrate Easter with the German people. He said there would be a meal for everyone. All were welcome. Come and eat together. Frau Hoffmann held Greta's hand and walked slowly toward the tables. Other women came too, bringing their children. Everyone moved carefully, still not quite believing this was real. The soldiers brought out the food. Frau Hoffmann's breath caught in her throat. There was a whole ham on each table. Whole hams with the bones still in them, glazed and steaming. There were bowls of mashed potatoes so big that 3 people could not lift them. Green beans cooked with bits of bacon. Dinner rolls that were soft and warm, with real butter in small dishes. And then came the pies. Apple pies with sugar sprinkled on top and the smell of cinnamon rising from them. The chaplain said a prayer. Frau Hoffmann had not prayed in a long time. She was not sure God was listening anymore. But she bowed her head with everyone else. The chaplain thanked God for peace and for the chance to share this meal. He prayed for all the people who were hungry and hurting. He prayed for forgiveness and healing. His voice was gentle. When he said amen, some of the women were crying. The soldiers told everyone to sit and eat. Frau Hoffmann sat with her 3 children. An American soldier helped fill their plates. He put a thick slice of ham on each plate. He added 2 big spoonfuls of potatoes. He gave them rolls and butter. He smiled at the children and said something in English that sounded friendly. Greta smiled back at him. Frau Hoffmann cut a piece of ham and put it in her mouth. The taste was so rich it almost hurt. Real meat, cooked with care, seasoned with salt and spices. Her body had forgotten what protein tasted like. Klaus ate his potatoes and asked for more. The soldier laughed and gave him another huge spoonful. Baby Elsa grabbed a roll and bit into it, getting butter all over her face. She looked happy. She looked like a normal child again. At the next table, an American soldier took out a photograph. He showed it to Frau Hoffmann. It was a picture of 2 children, a boy and a girl. They were standing in a yard with green grass. Behind them was a white house with a porch. The children were smiling. They looked healthy and clean. The soldier pointed to the picture and then pointed to himself. His children, back home in America. He said something in English and made a gesture like he missed them. Frau Hoffmann understood. He was a father too. He had children waiting for him, just like she was waiting for a husband who would never come home. She looked at this soldier's face. He was young, maybe 25. He could have been cruel. He could have hated all Germans for what the Nazis had done. His country had sent him across an ocean to fight. His friends had probably died in battle. But here he was, showing her pictures of his children and serving food to her children. Treating them like human beings. Treating them with kindness. Something broke inside Frau Hoffmann. Not broke like breaking apart, but broke like a dam breaking. All the lies she had believed came rushing out. She had been told the Americans were monsters. She had been told they would destroy Germany and hurt German children. She had believed it because the radio said it, and the newspaper said it, and the teacher said it, and everyone said it over and over until it seemed like truth. But it was all lies. Every word of it was lies. These men were not monsters. They were fathers and brothers and sons. They had more food and supplies than Germany could ever dream of. They could have let the German people starve. They could have taken revenge for all the death and destruction. Instead, they were feeding children. They were giving away medicine. They were setting tables with white cloths and serving Easter dinner to their enemies. Frau Hoffmann looked at Greta. Her daughter was eating apple pie now. There was color in her cheeks. Her eyes were bright. She was laughing at something Klaus said. She looked alive again. 2 weeks ago, Greta had been a skeleton with skin stretched over bones. Now she was a little girl who could laugh. Frau Hoffmann started to cry. The tears came hard and would not stop. She was not crying from happiness, she was crying from shame. Shame so deep it felt like it would crush her chest. She had believed the lies. She had supported a government that let children starve while leaders lived in comfort. She had been taught to hate these American soldiers, and now they were the ones saving her children's lives. Her own government, her own leaders, her own people had done nothing. They had taken everything and given nothing back. They had promised victory and delivered only death and ruin. An older German woman at the table put her hand on Frau Hoffmann's shoulder. She was crying too. Most of the women were crying now. Not all the tears were the same. Some cried from relief. Some cried from joy at having full stomachs. But many cried from the same shame and anger that Frau Hoffmann felt. They had been lied to. They had believed evil men who told them beautiful lies. And it took enemy soldiers to show them what real human kindness looked like. Frau Weber sat at the far end of another table. The old teacher was eating slowly. Her face looked strange, like she was fighting something inside herself. The war ended in May. Hitler was dead. Germany surrendered. The fighting stopped, but the occupation continued. The American soldiers stayed in the town. They brought more supplies. They helped clear rubble from the streets. They set up a medical clinic in an old school building. They gave out seeds so people could plant gardens. They were not acting like conquerors. They were acting like people trying to help a broken country get back on its feet. Summer came and the weather grew warm. Frau Hoffmann's children grew stronger. Greta gained weight. Her legs did not look like sticks anymore. Klaus's infection healed completely. Baby Elsa learned to walk and then to run. The regular food made all the difference. The American field kitchen kept operating for months. Every day there was hot food for anyone who needed it. Soup, bread, vegetables, sometimes meat. It was not fancy, but it was enough. It was more than enough. Frau Hoffmann started working with other women to clean up the town. They moved bricks and swept streets. They washed windows in buildings that still had windows. The Americans paid them in food and supplies. It was not money, but it was something. It gave the women purpose. It gave them a way to rebuild not just the town, but their own dignity. By autumn, things were changing faster. The Americans announced something called the Marshall Plan. They were going to send money and supplies to help rebuild all of Europe. Not just America's friends, but former enemies too. Germany would get help. Food, medicine, building materials, machines, everything needed to rebuild a country. Frau Hoffmann heard this news and could not understand it. Why would America spend so much money to help the people who had just been trying to kill them? It made no sense according to everything she had been taught about how the world worked. An American officer tried to explain it in simple German. He said that hungry, desperate people make bad choices. He said that poverty and suffering create anger, and anger creates war. He said America wanted peace, real peace that would last. The only way to get that was to help former enemies become stable and prosperous again. It was better to spend money on food and rebuilding than to spend it on another war in 20 years. Frau Hoffmann thought about this for a long time. The Treaty of Versailles after the First World War had punished Germany so harshly that it created the anger Hitler used to gain power. The Nazis had told Germans they were victims, that the world was against them, that they had to fight to survive. And desperate, hungry, angry people had believed it. Now America was doing the opposite. Instead of punishment, they offered help. Instead of revenge, they offered partnership. News came from the East. The Soviet Union occupied the other half of Germany. The stories that came from there were very different. The Soviets took everything. They stripped factories of machines and sent them to Russia. They took food instead of giving it. They were harsh and cold. The contrast was sharp and clear. West Germany under American occupation was getting food and medicine. East Germany under Soviet occupation was being stripped bare. Frau Hoffmann realized how lucky they were. If the Soviets had reached their town first, everything would be different. Her children might be starving again. There would be no chocolate, no field kitchens, no Marshall Plan. Just more suffering added to all the suffering that already existed. The Americans had reached them first, and that accident of geography had saved their lives. Years passed. The town slowly rebuilt. New buildings went up where old ones had been destroyed. The streets were cleared and paved. Water and electricity came back and stayed on. Gardens grew. Shops opened again. Life began to feel almost normal, though nothing would ever be quite the same as before the war. Greta grew into a teenager. She learned English at school. She was good at it. She told her mother that she wanted to be a translator someday. She wanted to help people from different countries understand each other. She kept the wrapper from that first chocolate bar in a small metal box under her bed. She would take it out sometimes and look at it, remembering the American soldier who had knelt down and offered her kindness when she expected cruelty. Klaus became interested in engineering. He wanted to build things instead of destroying them. He wanted to create instead of tearing down. He said he was tired of rubble and ruins. He wanted to make something new and good. The American soldiers had shown him that you could be strong and kind at the same time. You could have power and still choose gentleness. Frau Hoffmann never forgot those first days of occupation. She told her children stories about it. She wanted them to remember. Not just remember the hunger and fear, but remember the lesson that came after. She wanted them to understand that the people they had been taught to hate had shown them more humanity than their own leaders ever had. She got a notebook and started writing things down. Her handwriting was simple and plain. She wrote about the chocolate bar, about the Easter dinner, about the black soldier who bandaged Klaus's arm, about the American father who showed her pictures of his children. She wrote about her shame at believing the lies. She wrote about watching her children eat until they were full. She wrote about the moment she realized that everything she had been told about enemies and friends was backward. One entry in her notebook said this: "I spent 4 years hating these men. The radio told me they would burn our homes. The newspapers told me they would hurt our children. I believed every word. I was afraid. But they came and they fed us. They came and they healed us. They came and they treated us like human beings when they had every right to treat us like enemies. What does that say about the lies we believed? What does that say about the people who told us those lies? My own government let my children starve. My own leaders took everything and gave nothing back. Enemy soldiers from across the ocean showed us more kindness in 1 day than the Third Reich showed us in 12 years. This is the truth I will never forget. This is what I will teach my children." Frau Weber lived until she was almost 80. Before she died, she came to visit Frau Hoffmann one last time. The old teacher looked small and frail. She sat in a chair by the window and was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke. She said she had been wrong. About everything. She had believed in Hitler and the Nazi promises. She had taught children to hate. She had told people that Germany was superior and that enemies were less than human. All of it was lies, she said. All of it was poison. The worst part was not that she had believed the lies. The worst part was how long it took her to admit she was wrong. She told Frau Hoffmann about the day everything changed for her. It was a few weeks after the Easter dinner. An American soldier, very young, had helped her carry water from the well to her house. It was heavy and her arms were weak. He had not asked if she needed help. He just picked up the bucket and carried it for her. He walked her all the way home. When they got there, he set down the bucket, smiled, and walked away. That was all. Just a simple kindness from a young man who had no reason to be kind to her. Frau Weber said she went inside and cried for hours. She realized that she had spent her whole life teaching children that some people were worth more than others, that Germans were better, that enemies were evil. But this American boy had shown her more respect in 5 minutes than the Nazi Party had shown her in 20 years. He had treated her like she mattered, like she was human, and she had done nothing to deserve it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.